As an introduction, student retention refers to the university's ability to retain their students. Here we mean not the retention of vocabulary, because it's often misconfused with the vocabulary. There are two categories of constructs in the literature review. There is one dealing with students who leave university, and another one with those who stay in university. The latter is composed of student retention and student persistence. It means students' aspiration to continue their studies. And this paper investigates the use of complexity theory in Moroccan higher education research to shed light on the issue of student retention. In the Moroccan higher education context, as you know, it's difficult to keep track of students who leave university. The statistics are very alarming. According to the last statistics, more than 60% of students leave university in the first year, and 47% of university students leave university without getting a degree. Because of this, I have chosen to focus on the university's ability to retain their students, which means the participants were students who were actually freshman students. As far as the theoretical modeling is concerned, Forsman 2015 said there are two central models. There is the student integration model, introduced by Tinto, who is the father of retention research, which focuses on the students become integrated in the academic life through socialization, cultural assimilation. And there is the student attrition model. Attrition, it's opposed to retention. Attrition here means dropping out. It was introduced by Bean, which acknowledges students' beliefs, and the latter is formed by students' experiences, in which you have courses in university, social experiences, and the institutional quality. The complexity theory. It's like a conceptual framework. So complexity theory generally aims to describe and understand complex systems. University is a complex system in which you have a lot of interactions of agents and their capacity to show order, pattern, and structure. So especially more importantly, how these order and patterns and structures seemingly to emerge spontaneously. We cannot control the interactions between agents. For example, let's take the English department as a case study. In the absence of a centralized control for interactions between the complex systems, so there is an overlapping unpredicted interactions between students with each other, between the students in the curriculum, between the students and the professors and the faculty staff. So many people posit that the notion of complexity has mostly been used to say student retention is too complicated to understand. But this is because some researchers have identified many critical factors that may play a role in student decisions to continue their studies or not. In addition, these factors are not independent of one another, which make it very messy because they are very linked, the factors that affect student retention. So the theoretical framework presented in this paper is inspired from the work of Forsman, who is a Swedish researcher, which incorporates these multiple interaction factors within the modeling of complex systems. The research problem. So as I mentioned before in introduction, in the Moroccan higher education, there is little research has been conducted on student retention. More importantly, the use of complexity thinking, which draws on the qualities of complex systems to characterize learning systems, introduced by Davis and Sumara 2006, is a powerful conceptual framework in education, and it's still in its embryo phase, not yet fully explored. Thus, with its organic, nonlinear, relational, and holistic feature, complexity thinking presents a start point departure of the contemporary education research. So here I mean by Morrison 2006. And this article, this paper, is investigating the field of student retention from a novel, from a new perspective. So taking the Faculty of Letters and Humanities in Marrakesh as a complex system, every year there are hundreds of Moroccan students matriculating at the English department, but only few of them succeed to persist and get their degree. That's the research problem. Now let's move to the research questions. Two questions: what are the factors that affect student retention in the English department? And how can we establish an informative modeling for student retention in the complex system of English department? There are models, as you know, by Tinto and Bean, but I'm just trying to have an illustrative modeling using complexity thinking. Research hypothesis. Student retention, we have five hypotheses. Student retention depends on grade achievement. Satisfaction with financial situation leads to student retention. Male students are more retained than female students. Number 4, science, economic baccalaureate students are more retained than arts, humanities baccalaureate students. And the fifth one, student retention depends on parents' education. As for the research objectives, to answer the research questions, number 1, to identify the factors that affect student retention. And number 2, to represent a modeling of the English department student retention using complexity thinking. For the research methodology, a quantitative approach was adopted, as it can be defined as an inquiry to a social human problem. And it was based on testing a theory composed of variables. That's what I did by analyzing it with statistical procedures in order to determine whether the predictive generalization of the theory hold true. This is done by Criswell, who was an illuminating scholar on methodology. Its main aims are objectively to measure the social world when we're using quantitative research, to test hypotheses and to control human behavior. So Criswell points that quantitative approach is useful when attempting to test a theory to explain and identify the factors that influence results. That's why I've opted for a quantitative approach. As for the research instrument, as you know, I've chosen a questionnaire based on these reasons to assess students' social and academic integration in their later and goal institutional commitment. The institutional integration scales that I have used were developed by Pascarella and Terenzini, 1980, and they were used to measure these 4 constructs. The first one, initial goal and institutional commitment. Students come to university with an initial goal, and there is an institutional commitment. So there were items measuring this construct. Number 2, social integration. This is a scale, and we have used items to measure it. Academic integration, later goal, and institutional commitment. Participants, they were, of course, as I told you before, from the English department. There were 115 English department freshman students during the academic year 2018-2019, and they were males and females from 7 different groups of semester 2. They were freshman students. Freshman students were selected because research has shown that most students drop out during the freshman year. This was validated by these scholars, as you can see here. Now to the results. The first results of the hypothesis testing. So the results of the analysis indicated that 3 out of 5 hypotheses were supported by statistically significant results. As you can see here, the hypothesis and the results. So the confirmed hypotheses are: number 1, grade achievement has an effect on student retention, which means as students have good grades achievements, they are retained and stay in the system. If they don't do well in their exams and grade achievement, they drop out. The fourth one is confirmed. Science, economic baccalaureate students are more retained than arts, humanities students. As you can know, in Morocco, in the English department especially, you can hold a baccalaureate, scientific baccalaureate, or an arts baccalaureate, and you can study English. So science students are more retained than art students. And the last one, parents' education has an effect on student retention. As the parents' education increases, the retention increases. As the parents' education, level of education decreases, the retention decreases accordingly. Now I have used a tool. If you are familiar with the SPSS, I have used this tool, the Exploratory Factor Analysis, the EFA. So what does the EFA do? It reveals that some of the items are present in more than one factors. This was interpreted as an evidence of interactions. It was guided by the complexity thinking between the nested system. So with the data that are grounded in literature, I have run a factor analysis, and this was to recognize that the nested system that make up the greatest system of student retention by identifying the factors. Are you still hearing me? That's great. So the analytical tool was SPSS, the statistical package of the social sciences, and we have used a normalized matrix of the questionnaire data with the grades of students, the baccalaureates, and the modules passed in semester 1, age and gender. So these are the results. So even though that my sample participant is too small to even attempt a tentative of characterizing these factors, a study with sufficiently large enough sample could characterize each factor according to the highest loading variables. So I generated the following factors, 4 factors that had direct effect on student retention. The initial goal and institutional commitment. So students have to come to university with a clear initial goal, and they have to be institutionally committed if they want to persist and to continue their studies. Number 2, social integration. Students who have a good social relationships with the professors, with their colleagues, and with their staff of the faculty are more retained. Family background. Here I mean the level of education. Students who come from educated parents, they are more likely to retain. And the last one is academic integration. Here I mean by being integrated academically, participating in the classroom and having high grades. To establish the model, to answer, yes? All right, I'll wrap up. Thank you so much, Ms. Amri. So I've made a model to explain these results. As you can see here in this graph, that's a way of visualizing the nestedness of the complex system. So society is more general, and it embodies family background, and family background has an effect on initial goal and institutional commitments, which has an effect on the social integration and the academic integration of the students. Here's another way of visualizing it: the linked and the networked adjacency of these factors. So family background effect on social integration, and they affect there are links between these factors. Recommendations, 3 main recommendations: increase contact between students and staff and professors in a more informal way, because a lot of students complained about the relationship between the faculty members and the students. Number 2, allowing students to form clubs and societies, arts, music, public speaking. It will help them a lot. Number 3, I recommend for Qadayad University, which is the university the research was done, to provide more support and advice to students, especially in the first weeks or the first month for freshman students. Limitations of the study, as you may know, some participants, they took it, the number of participants was limited, 115. Some students didn't take it, didn't give real answers. And but I think that this research has at least have made some new insights on how can we use complexity thinking to deal with student retention, which is not very discussed. I will conclude with this last slide. So the results presented in the Tinto's model, and they were suitable for the Moroccan context. However, some elements in the theory of Tinto are not applicable in our context. For example, in the Western theory, students, they pay money to go to university. In Morocco, they don't pay money. They get a scholarship. So that's even helping Moroccans. So we motivate them by giving them scholarship. So in summary, I have tried to show how complexity thinking perspective can provide unique possibilities and interpretations. And I have also attempted. Okay, could you just? I have just 4 lines, and I finish, Ms. Amri, if you allow. 4 lines. So I have attempted to show how complementary tools like correlations, exploratory factor analysis can be used to study student retention. Items shared by multiple factors could be interpreted as areas to post-secondary institutions. So my main goal of the paper is to help universities and to help the ministry to have the critical factors and work on them, so that we can have more graduate students. As far as we have more graduate students, our higher education system will improve. Thank you so much for listening. Welcome. Welcome.